I got a new microphone recently, so you should be able to hear me clearer, and if you notice any factual or number errors in the video, that's because I moved recently and I didn't have time to go back and fix them, so sorry about that, but thank you so much and enjoy the video. Amaranthus has kicked the local residents out of this garden. Head in and defeat Amaranthus so that the garden can be enjoyed by all. No proprietary property in this video game, that's why it's called Free Realms and not My Realms. And, in all honesty, the gameplay for this dungeon is so boring that Red Jack on YouTube couldn't even record the whole dungeon. This video straight up cuts out after 2 minutes, he's just done with it. So, I think that kind of shows you how the landscape just goes on forever. There's nothing... I could have probably made it in a 3D art program. I don't know about this one. Fungal beasts and bats are causing havoc, so defeat Marasmius put a stop to their antics. My only question about this dungeon, why there's so many vine wolves everywhere? Like, probably half the enemies in this dungeon are vine wolves, which are neither mushroom nor bat. I don't know if they were just like in the area and they wandered in. I tried looking it up or like finding out what I could about vine wolves, but nothing helpful. So rest in peace, Calcina, I think that name is. It's so blurry, there's no way I can tell. She died. Something evil has corrupted the once beautiful Florin Forest. Travel deep into the forest to find the source and defeat it. This is a really cool description because it doesn't spoil the whole story of the dungeon before you enter it, like all the other stories so far. But it turns out that Osmandius, the stone statue guy, has corrupted the minds of all the Florins in the forest. And you don't know that until the end, so you're just trying to figure out why these normally peaceful NPCs are basically trying to fight you. And what's cool about this is there's a double boss fight at the end. There's a feather on my phone. Where you have to defeat the large Florin, or get him to low health, and that breaks his mind control, and then he'll actually help you to defeat the actual boss, Osmandius, who turns out to be a total pushover, easy boss, doesn't do anything. Then afterwards, the evil Florin, which I guess is what his parents named him because his name doesn't change when the mind control does, thanks the player, vows to return peace to the forest. So, really cool story. I feel like they actually put some thought into that. And the level design got lots of hills, lakes, a nice spread of trees and other 3D objects, not just a flat, boring mountain area. So I feel like there's a lot of effort put into that. And we're going to see later down on the list there's some even better examples of level design too. But definitely a cool story paired with good level design. Number 6, the Snarling Hedges has quite a bit in common with the Florin Forest story-wise, where Nog the Cruel basically corrupts the forest and releases a bunch of bad guys. But the story isn't as well developed as the Florin Forest because they tell you the story from the beginning, and there's no NPC dialogue besides the boss saying something to the effect of, "You'll never defeat me," at the end. What does make this one special, though, is the bonus objective, which we haven't been able to talk to up to this point because they've all been basically the same. But for this dungeon, you have to defeat 3 mini-bosses at the same time in their own arena, which was apparently too scary for our beloved Freddy Speedy Pants because he didn't do it. And as far as the layout, it gets a lot of points because you start in a narrow area in a maze, and you cross some bridges to some open areas, and in the boss arena there's a cool semicircle of giant vines. So I think they did a really good job just putting this level together and designing the areas you walk around. Only complaint is it's maybe a little too long, like just too many enemies, kind of unnecessary at a certain point. But yeah, really cool. First of all, Howling Hills is such a cool name because it paints this word picture of like this threat in the distance. But the story sounds kind of generic until you think of the implications. Trained snow wolves and their ice troll masters threaten Snow Hill. These trolls, though, are completely ready to just raze the town of Snow Hill to the ground, and you can even see a sample of their work later in the dungeon. Behind the boss, there's like a house in ruins and on fire. So I'm just imagining, like, if you didn't complete this dungeon, just all of Snow Hill would be on fire. So that's kind of interesting. I actually am not sure about that building in the background. It's a little blurry, but I'm pretty sure it's ruins. And the story feels a little bit like something from Lord of the Rings, you know, like with the orcs and the, I guess they ride on wolves, don't they, if I remember. The level feels very alive, lots of good object placement. It really feels like you're fighting in the mountains just above Snow Hill. Across all 3 tiers of dungeons, I think Bonebog Cemetery has the worst story, just because it doesn't have a story, but it more than makes up with it. It's still in 4th place because of the level design. If you just look at the fog effects, the way the trees are placed, the cliffs with the gravestones at the bottom, the fences, everything is perfect. And I think part of that is because the layout is so short, it's just like a little zigzag up a hill with a boss at the end. They're able to put more detail into this tiny area, and even way off in the distance you can tell they just rendered this thing completely and wholeheartedly. And I think that makes it feel like a snippet of a real adventure. The other thing that makes this dungeon special is the enemies. They're unique. You don't see them in any other dungeons really, and instead of big groups of enemies, there's little groups or single enemies separated, like the banshees or the grave elementals. It's such a cool dungeon. Number 2 is Misty Mountain. The normally peaceful and benign elemental guardians are attacking anyone seeking the Oracle. The Oracle in this case is the Rose Who Knows, and it turns out that Snowface knows a lot more about the Rose Who Knows because he's trying to take its power for himself. Now, the Rose Who Knows is one of the strangest unexplained things in Free Realm's lore, and that alone is one of the reasons this dungeon gets 2nd place. It can teleport, it can see the future, it can talk. It's just a giant floating blue rose. And the dungeon has a decent selection of enemies and placement. The aesthetic at the bottom of the mountain isn't too special, but once you get towards the top and there's these narrow pathways, it's pretty cool. It feels like you're really climbing a tall mountain. And there's some cool looking ice caves too. So the story, very, very weird for Free Realms, and it just looks pretty cool too. Finally, number 1, Forgotten Caves. Archmage Betulia foolishly ventured into the Memorial Caverns by herself. Go into the caverns and see if she needs help. So this is more of an escort mission than your standard beat-em-up dungeon, although, I mean, it still is a beat-em-up dungeon, but with 2 people. And it's a cave, you know, it looks kind of like something from Subnautica, which is really cool. It's not just a boring cave like Mushroom Caverns. And the changelings, the enemies in this dungeon, it really feels like a horde game, almost like a zombie game, because there's just so many of them. And let's see what else. I guess we follow Petulia. She gathers some samples from these braziers, and she never explains what they are. And I think that's what makes this dungeon so special, to me anyways, is that they don't fully explain why you're even there. You don't even find out at the end of the dungeon. You don't even know if Archmage Betulia is a good person. You could be helping this evil maniac destroy the changeling's livelihood, because nowhere does it say that the changelings are evil. So that's just something to think about too. You could be helping someone do something bad. You can't vouch for her character. So it's almost like a moral dilemma inside of a children's game dungeon. Yeah, anyways, that's the one I'm looking forward to doing again the most. It's cool to be able to do it with more than just one person. And that's it. That's all the level 3 dungeons. I was pretty excited to do this one. We have more than last time, 9 dungeons total. And I think next one for the level 4 dungeons, we're going to have even more. So looking forward to that one, and I hope to see you there too. Bye-bye.